the chosen one. Be brave, Professor. Be brave like my mother.
How do you feel?
Excellent. Really excellent.
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We are covering Chapter 7, The Slug Club. Elizabeth is back with us.
Hi, everyone.
And there is a lot to this chapter. We start out at the Burrow with them getting ready to set off for the Hogwarts Express and platform 9 3/4. We get a couple of interactions between characters here. We get a Harry Arthur moment. We get a couple of moments between Harry and Neville and Luna, amongst some other random students. We also get the introduction of the Slug Club itself.
Yep.
And then we get some action post-Slug Club.
Which makes me cringe so much. So much. Which we'll get to, but my God.
Cringe is an interesting word.
I am pre-cringing right now.
Pre-cringing is an even interesting It's an even more interesting word. We'll start out with the Burrow and them prepping. And we start off with Harry noting that he spent a lot of the last week thinking about Draco Malfoy. I'm not thrilled with how much Harry thinks about Draco Malfoy, but
It's a little obsessive.
It's a little obsessive.
Ron and Hermione are at the point where they're like, okay, Harry, we get it. Yes, he was weird. That was unusual behavior. Can we move on?
Yeah, they're definitely not interested in all of it. They kind of shrug a lot of it off as Draco's being dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we
character.
Yeah, that's how we know Draco. That's who he is. He's got a tendency to brag about his own status and his own, well-being all of the time anyway. So how is this any different?
Right.
Which is fair.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
not doing anything very out of character right now.
No, he's doing essentially what they've known him to be the entire time they've known him. So to them, it's just like, well, this is another day.
Yeah.
It's just Draco being Draco. Harry, however, believes Draco has elevated to the level of Death Eater.
Mm-hmm. Which, to be fair, I mean, his evidence is like, okay, he wouldn't let Madame Malkin touch his left arm, which we know would be the arm with the, Voldemort's mark on it. And he said he intimidated Borgin. Obviously, he wants revenge for his father being in Azkaban. Clearly, he's in the same social circle as Voldemort. So it's a good theory. They put it down, though, because they're like, he's 16. Voldemort doesn't want an underage child being a Death Eater.
I'm not saying, to Harry's defense, I'm not saying that he's wrong in piecing together some of these, albeit, warning signs.
Red flags.
Yeah, he's not wrong for looking at some of these signs and going like, hey, if 1 and 1 is 2, shouldn't 2 of these warning signs equal Death Eater? I'm not blaming him for that logic, but I don't blame Ron and Hermione either for being like, he's a kid that we know to be over-exaggerating and full of hyperbole all the time anyway.
It'd be enough to okay, Harry, we'll pay attention to it, but right now the amount of evidence that you have compiled is not enough to persuade me.
Yeah, I think they both have points here.
Yeah.
So that's fair. Before we leave the Burrow, we get another Fleur, interesting interaction. We get her discussing the wedding that her and Bill are going to have, and she's talking about bridesmaids, and Molly Weasley's not having it. Although I think her points on the bridesmaids are fair. And
it's very much wedding planning, because she's like, okay, we're going to have Ginny, and we're going to have my sister, and they cannot wear pale pink, because pale pink would look horrible with her red hair, and we got to, make us all look pretty. It's a legitimate wedding.
She's trying to make Ginny look good. It's not like she's trying to, bash on Ginny.
Right.
She's like, I think this dress would look better on Ginny.
No, and that's a perfectly normal thing to focus on.
And she's keeping Molly involved in the wedding by, going over some of these plans with her, at least telling her.
Molly right now reminds me of the kind of mom who's, originally asked to be part of the wedding planning, but it's like, okay, now I'm exhausted with this. Can you let me go? I really don't want to listen to it anymore.
Well, she's also not the biggest fan of the wedding at this point anyway.
Right.
So I'm sure that kind of wears on her. Like, I don't even approve of this thing. And
Right.
why am I hearing all of these plans? But to Fleur's defense, I mean, it's fair.
Yeah.
All of what she's saying is fair. We get an uncharacteristically smooth departure from the burrow.
I love that.
And we do get the little tidbit that Ginny does indeed have a pygmy puff. It is purple, and his name is Arnold.
Yay. Another pet in the family.
Another pet. Another trivia
What
question.
are these things anyway? Like, what are these little puffs?
They're supposed to be miniature puffskins.
Okay.
So they're like, obviously, a miniature version of a creature in the wizard world.
Because right now, all I picture are like what my cat plays with as little toys that she comes and hunts for me, but with eyeballs.
I wonder how Crookshanks is going to deal with this.
Yeah.
But yes,
Another thing to hunt.
this is definitely a trivia question somewhere. Purple is the color, and Arnold is the name. So there you go.
Ron has a little bit of an awkward moment. in
Awkward's a
their
good
meeting.
word for it.
It makes me cringe.
Yeah. So Harry gets a kiss from Fleur goodbye, which is natural. First of all,
It's natural for, I mean, she's French.
she's French.
That's how you greet or say goodbye to someone.
Correct. A lot of if you're in America listening to this,
Yeah, we don't do this in
we
America.
don't do this in America. Many cultures, not even just the French,
Right.
give a kiss on the cheek.
Right.
That's normalized.
Yeah.
That's fine. Ron then tries to rush forward and get the same goodbye, which Ginny recognizes.
She trips him.
She recognizes it. She promptly trips him, and he falls face first in the dust and mud.
Which, okay, for one, I love the fact that Ginny is able to pull one on Ron the same way like Fred and George would have pulled it on Ron. Like, Ron is just like, I mean, Ginny's the baby, but Ron is very much like the we're going to poke and make fun of the most.
I wonder how Fred and George react around Fleur. Do they get swept up in the villainous of her or not?
I feel like they would continue their jokes.
Would they ramp it up? Would they get progressively more cheesy?
Maybe like dad puns.
Oh, well, maybe a little bit.
Humor is attractive, so maybe that's a thing. But it just makes me laugh a little, but also cringe a little because it's like, okay, we know Ron had a crush on her once upon a time, and
2 years ago? Not even 2 years ago?
So 2 years ago. Whatever.
Year and a half ago?
And she's part Vila, so obviously that's a charm to her. But I still think it's weird that, like, once you know someone is going to be your in-law, being like, ooh, I wonder if I could get a kiss from her. Like, come on. That's going to be your future sister-in-law. Don't be weird.
It's a little weird.
It's very weird.
I think the idea that there's still that villainous to Fleur, so you know that is a little bit to it.
Well, I like the fact that Ginny literally brought him down to earth again, too. But I'm kidding.
Did you even intend that pun? The laughter would indicate no, and then she figured out that she made it funny.
I'm hilarious, you guys. But no, I just think it's an interesting thing for him to still be doing, knowing the wedding plans are well underway.
It is what it is. They get to the King's Cross station to board the Hogwarts Express. There is a ministry contingent here to greet them. Harry pulls Arthur aside, and he wants to have a conversation with just Arthur. And that conversation happens because Harry believes Arthur is the right one to tell, because A, he works at the Ministry of Magic, and B, he notes his calm demeanor.
Right.
He won't get overly upset. He won't get overly, concerned. He's not going to overreact to whatever Harry's about to tell him.
I love the fact that he went to talk to Arthur about this.
For a couple of reasons.
I mean, it shows growth. He hasn't done this in the past. He doesn't talk to the adults because he's like, oh, they can't help me, or oh, I'm off in my own little world, and I gotta take care of this myself because I'm Harry Potter. But now it's like recognizing that hasn't always worked in the past. Arthur is the perfect candidate to talk to. Like, do this more often.
No, I think that's definitely a good point to bring up, is it does show growth in Harry, that he is now actually putting enough trust in, at the very least, Arthur, to speak with an adult. And B, I like it that it's Arthur. I think we've talked before on the podcast, whether it be in non-spoiler or spoiler sections, about how just Arthur as a character and how the twins clearly appreciate him and have a bond with him.
Yeah, he's a great father for them. He had the quote about like, you know, Harry, please, you're talking to the man who raised Fred and George. When Harry's like, yeah, we sneaked away.
Well, he calls him
I
out.
didn't think you noticed. It's like, of course I noticed. Are you kidding me?
As soon as they're alone, Arthur calls Harry out on it. He's like, am I about to find out where you actually went to?
But I just love that shows like Arthur recognizes you should pick your battles. And if you do, and your kids like trust you, not that Harry's his child, but regardless, like if you show your kids that you're a safe place to talk to and they have your trust and all that, like they'll be open with you, and that's what you want from your relationship with your children. He does a fantastic job as a dad.
Arthur is a wonderful dad, as he's raised
so many kids.
So many kids. And they've all turned out pretty darn good. Except for Percy. No. Yeah, so Harry essentially tells him all of the ideas that he has regarding Draco Malfoy. Mm-hmm. And he's disappointed to hear that Arthur generally, although he's much more diplomatic about it, mm-hmm. generally Arthur has the same opinions about Draco. Yeah, you know, I don't know that Voldy would really employ a 16-year-old. I don't know that that's where he wants to go.
Which again, I still don't understand all this plain like Voldemort says, Voldemort thinks. Like, how are we supposed to know what Voldemort thinks or not? Like, he's an evil wizard, but just because you wouldn't necessarily employ a 16-year-old doesn't mean that he wouldn't.
Well, we know they wouldn't, because the Order has had this argument with the kids before about like, we're not using children.
You're not going to risk your lives for this.
Yeah, we're not putting you on the front lines of a war.
Right.
And here, Voldy seems to be, according to Draco, or Draco's presenting it as such, that Voldy's putting him on the front lines. Mm-hmm. I think it might show a difference between Death Eaters and the Order of the Phoenix. Mm-hmm. That being said, if you're, you know, a Death Eater, like if you're Lucius or you're Crabbe or you're Goyle, I don't know that you really love the idea of your sons being put on the front line.
You probably wouldn't volunteer them unless you knew that it was going to get you more credit with Voldemort.
I don't even know that you do that, because...
Or like if you didn't do it, then he's going to like retaliate.
Well, that's the problem with following someone like Voldy.
That's why you don't follow cult leaders.
I can't imagine any of them are super like, yeah, let's get our kids in the front line. I think they're all very like protective of their children. It's just when you have Voldy and we've talked about the presence of Voldemort, and when he comes knocking at your door, you don't have a choice anymore.
You have one response, and that's what he wants you to respond as.
Otherwise, it's a very negative outcome for you. Yeah. And you know, we've talked about that in the idea of our good characters. Mm-hmm. And now we're getting in the realm of the Death Eaters too. Like, he comes knocking and asks for something, you best give it to him. Otherwise.
Well, to Arthur's credit, like, he didn't completely push Harry aside. I mean, he even said the Ministry went through Malfoy Manor after Lucius was arrested, and they looked for stuff. They confiscated stuff. So,
well, that's an important point, because
if there's anything dark, like, we took it already.
Harry brings up that he was interested in something in Borgin and Burkes. Mm-hmm. That's when Arthur responds, is like, well, yeah, he might have something, but we've already raided everything that Lucius owns. Right. So we would have found something. Mm-hmm. So that I think is a credible response to Harry's inquiries, where...
Because, like, we take you seriously. We just...
Well, Ron and Hermione don't. As much as they want to, they don't have any credible thing to say, like, Harry, you're wrong and this is why. Right. Here, Arthur is giving him a why. Your inquiries are maybe incorrect or misplaced, but here's a credible reason why. We raided their mansion and we couldn't find anything. Right. So, or I should take that back. They definitely found stuff. But
we took stuff.
But they took it.
Yeah.
So they raided, they found, they took. Right. So anything that might have been questionable is now in Ministry of Magic control. So I think that was important for Harry to get that and let that sink in, because
He
otherwise
doesn't love the response, but you're right. Like, clearly
he accepts it.
He's taking you seriously, which is why you went to him in the first place.
Right. He accepts that response a lot better than just a flat dismissal, even though that's essentially what he gets is a flat dismissal. But anyway, so we get on to the actual Hogwarts Express.
Mm-hmm.
And we learn a little bit about Harry's new status as a student because, well, I shouldn't say new. It's just a different vibe on the same old because...
I mean, we've talked before how, depending on the point of the year, he's either everybody's favorite student or everyone's least favorite student.
Right, but either way, he's getting stared at.
Yeah.
So that's the same old bit. He's always being stared at.
Yeah.
This time around, it happens to be a more flattering stared at.
Especially amongst the ladies.
Yeah, he finds himself immediately surrounded by girls, which he doesn't seem to really respond well to.
I mean, like, he wants to sit with Ron and Hermione, but they're prefects. They got to go do their job. And he wants to sit with Ginny, but she's dating Dean, so she's got to go off to him. So it's just him, Neville, and Luna.
He seems quite overjoyed that he was rescued from this gaggle of girls by Luna and Neville. Who are also themselves getting used to the attention because Neville's like, they're all looking at us because we're with you.
Right.
And Harry's like, you were in the story too. You were there too. Like, what does this mean?
Don't discredit what you did.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Neville says that his gran he thought she would be very upset at this whole thing. And instead, he's like, she's actually really positive about it. And she's starting to say that I'm starting to live up to my dad.
He got a new wand out of that.
He got a new wand.
Which is fantastic because he needed one really badly.
Well, it was broken.
Right.
In the minute, so I mean, he had to.
Right.
And it was his dad's wand, which again, heartbreak.
I said it might have been one of Ollivander's last wands that he sold before he disappeared.
Yeah, because it was like the night before or something like that.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I don't want to rush that. Neville's grandmother is saying he's finally starting to live up to his dad. I think that gives Neville a sense of
tons of pride.
Pride, but self-assurance, where he's like, oh, maybe I can do this.
Right.
Maybe I'm not just the bumbling idiot of the group. Maybe I can actually blend in a lot more than I once thought I could.
I have worth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's giving him a sense of confidence that I don't think he ever had. Because now he's getting some positive vibes sent his way, not all negative all the time like it used to be. I
think the other thing that, unfortunately, like what used to give them confidence but won't continue this year is that, Dumbledore's army is not continuing. Which I feel so bad for Luna because she has that comment. She's like, oh, it was like having friends. I liked hanging out. It's like, oh, that's such an uncomfortable comment, but also an honest comment to make. And it's really sad to me that they can't keep that for her and for Neville. They need to be involved more, hang out more.
For all of you wand aficionados, we're not going to rush past Neville's new wand. It's made of cherry and unicorn hair. Yeah. So mark that one down for you wand lovers.
For the trivia questions.
For the trivia questions. We're all about the trivia. Yeah, Luna makes that semi-awkward comment, which Harry notes is like, I'm a little uncomfortable about that.
Yeah. She makes another one too, though.
She makes another one a little bit later, but Romilda Vane pops in. She's a fourth year, followed by a gaggle of fourth-year girls who show up at their compartment, and she's the bold one to pop her head in and tries to lure Harry to their compartment instead.
Like, you don't have to sit with them. It's very mean girls.
She's a fourth year. What has she got on Luna and Neville? Like, what is this? What is this disrespect?
Do you think Harry or Hermione or Ron pay attention to anyone else in other years? I mean, other than like Ginny.
To an extent.
I guess to an extent, but I'm like, your fourth years being like, oh yeah, those are the loser 6 years. Like, I'm sorry, you're still a fourth year. Get out of here.
Well, I'm sure many fifth, sixth, and seventh year thought the exact same thing about Harry during year 1, 2, and 3. Like, who's this kid?
What would we say? Like,
not who's this kid, obviously.
What was our first year dumb, first year?
Second year stupid. I don't know. I don't remember. It's been a minute. How about with his apparent pathway that he's choosing here of loving Draco Malfoy so much? Sixth year stalker. How about 6-year stalker? I like it. I like it. I'm going with it. That's going to be mine at least.
It only works for Harry, though.
That's fine. That's fine. So,
oh my gosh.
Anyway, after Romilda Vane pops in and tries to lure Harry away, but she is unsuccessful. Luna says that people like that expect Harry to be hanging out with cooler people, which is another uncomfortable comment, like 2 in a row out of Luna. And Harry refutes it by saying, "What are you talking about? They didn't all fight with me at the Ministry of Magic. Right. Like, you guys did that.
You are my true friends.
Yeah, you guys are pretty amazing. Yeah. Just don't ever forget that."
Which I don't think Luna's ever been told that, because she was like, "Oh, that was nice of you to say."
Well, so just her saying, they expect you to be friends with cooler people. That's her acknowledging, like,
I'm cool.
Well, yes. But it's also she just acknowledged that, I do have friends.
Yeah.
It's a backhanded way.
Yeah.
Because the highlight is, I'm not cool.
Yeah.
But after Harry just said to Romilda about, like, they aren't my friends.
Right.
Then Luna was like, they expect you to have cooler friends than us.
Yeah.
So it's Luna acknowledging, like, I do have friends, apparently.
It's a happy moment for Luna. I really like this moment for her.
An awkward but happy.
Yeah. Which describes Luna really well. So there you go. Also uncomfortable, though. Neville said that his grandmother has been singing Harry's praises and was like, I bet she wishes you were her grandson. And Harry's like, wow, you really have no idea how close you came to being in my shoes. Like, literally everything I've gone through could have been you.
Well, their roles could have been entirely reversed. And we saw what Neville's life is like, especially with that look in the chapter on the closed ward. Right. And I got to tell you, like, neither of their lives are great.
No, they're really not.
So, I mean, you're picking between apples and oranges here.
Yeah.
Neither of them's great, and you're both in the crosshairs. Like, let's be real about it. Harry might be in the crosshairs of Voldy. Neville is still squarely in the crosshairs of one prominent Death Eater. Bellatrix. Bellatrix still wants to finish that job.
She's got a grudge.
Which we learned about in the Department of Mysteries. So she's
they
not...
both have targets on their back.
She's not exactly in the clear here either.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they both are still firmly in this world. It's not like one got an escape clause.
It's just nice seeing Harry reflect about Neville, because I feel like, unfortunately, Neville gets so little attention from the trio.
Again, with Neville, I do want to point out yet another trivia question for Neville. We find out they discussed the OWLs, but they didn't ever really get into Neville's specific grades outside of he did get an acceptable in Transfiguration.
Good for him.
It is good for him because that was another exam where he might have felt a little bit nervous. I mean, McGonagall is an intimidating presence.
Yeah.
But, I mean, McGonagall has had encouraging words for him about, like, just do it.
Right.
Like, you're capable.
Right.
Just do it.
Right.
And I think this is another example of when you get away from the person that is intimidating you a little bit, though McGonagall is not as derogatory as Snape.
She just has high expectations, and there's the fear of not meeting them.
She's an intimidating presence. No matter which way you cut it, she's still an intimidating presence. So to get her out of the room and you're just allowed to do it, I think had a lot to do with Neville's improvement there.
I mean, you think about their relationship. There's been so many times she's had to yell at him. I mean, think about like when he lost all the passwords to Gryffindor Tower.
Sure, yeah.
That was intimidating, so makes sense.
So Neville did get an acceptable in Transfiguration, which is awesome for him. They both, speaking of awesome for Neville, they both get an invitation to lunch with Horace Slughorn, Compartment C.
Which I think is interesting. Like, Slughorn taking the train. The last time we saw a professor take the train was Lupin, and Lupin was passed out. Slughorn obviously not passed out, but I wonder if he's taking the train specifically for this opportunity to like interact with the students in this more low-key setting, or if he was put on the train as part of his own security, because we know he was like running away from Death Eaters. So if this was like Dumbledore's way of trying to protect him, or just Slughorn's way of, nitpicking the best students that he can at the moment.
So I'm picking the best students, and we'll get into which students are actually the first invitees of this Slug Club meeting. But I wonder how Slughorn got wind of which students were even available. Like, who's even there, what their connections are. Like, how did he pull this together so quick? Did he talk to other teachers? Did he send owls to other teachers being like...
I'm sure he got his rosters.
Who's, like, just send... Well, yeah, but still, I mean, maybe he did. Maybe he got a list of students that are at Hogwarts and recognized last names or recognized, whatever. Do you think he sent an owl to Flitwick and be like, who's the best in charms? Who's the best in transfiguration? Who's the best in...
Well, okay, speaking of his picking process, which I guess we could get to a little more later too, but it seems interesting to me. Some of them are obviously like legacy picks, where it's like, okay, I knew your father or your mother and they were great, so I'm going to assume that you're also great, or like your relative did something amazing, so I'm going to see if you have any aspect of that too. So maybe because he knew those people, he has some sense of like, oh, hey, your nephew or your niece or your daughter that you've been writing to me about all these years. I've done the calculations and I know they should be in Hogwarts at this point.
So we also know that, I mean, obviously he has his process, which is to your point, it's a varied process.
Yeah, because it's like part of it is you're related to somebody amazing. So therefore, I'm going to check you out. But otherwise, it's like he just looks upon them and it's like, oh, I saw you do something impressive. Okay. I kind of get a read on you that you might be great. Come to my compartment. Have lunch with me.
Yeah, it's a little amalgamation of a couple of different characteristics that he's looking for, which is fine. Let's just get to the list. We get this list of students. We get Blaise Zabini, who's a 6th year, so our year, Harry Potter's year. Slytherin. We get, obviously, Harry Neville. We get Ginny, who is hidden behind Slughorn's large persona.
She just was like so surprised that she's even there.
She's like, why am I even here?
Right.
I don't know. She's also the youngest one here. Let's note that.
Also the only woman.
The only female, yep. We get Cormac McLagan, who is a 7th year Gryffindor. We get Marcus Belby, who's a 7th year Ravenclaw. So we get 2 7 years. We get 3 6th years. And we get a younger student in Ginny, who's, again, the only female. We also get an assortment of houses. We get Slytherin, we get Gryffindor, and we get Ravenclaw. No Hufflepuffs.
No Hufflepuffs, yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. Now, the breakdown of these students. Marcus Belby is here because his uncle Damocles invented the Wolfsbane potion. The problem there is... the uncle, by the way, that is a noteworthy accomplishment. That is a big-time accomplishment.
Like we think about Lupin saying how the Wolfsbane potion had been created not too long ago, but knowing that this kid, his uncle, is the one who did it, it's like, oh, dang, that really is a recent thing.
It's pretty remarkable. The problem is, the uncle seems to have an issue with Marcus's father, and therefore is not very close with the family. And Slughorn seems to immediately cool on Marcus Belby. So that's Belby's situation. Cormac McLagan. Cormac is the 7th year Gryffindor. He has interacted with the new Minister of Magic, although he's... Rufus. Yes, he's interacted with the new Minister of Magic, Rufus. However, his interaction, as he notes very modestly, that it was prior to him becoming Minister of Magic.
I feel like if anything, that makes it more impressive. Because it's like, oh, I knew him, and then he got his promotion, and yeah, we're still on good terms.
His uncle, Cormac's uncle, is a big deal in the Ministry of Magic, which we'll learn a little bit later, but which is probably where Horace picked this up. It's like, oh, McLagan? McLagan's your last? Okay, all right. I know who you are.
Right.
Then we get Blaise Zabini, who has a very interesting history. His gorgeous mother has married 7 times, with each of them dying mysteriously, somehow, just randomly, leaving them a bunch of gold.
It reminds me of the Haunted Mansion. Because
I knew you were
literally
gonna say
part of that.
I knew you were going to say that.
I'm saying it for me and for Jen because literally part of the plot of Haunted Mansion is that there's a bride who is killing all her husbands and they die mysterious deaths. Dun,
Yes.
dun, dun.
Why do you think Blaze is included here? Just because of the...
Well, I would think maybe because it's a child of one of those marriages. I would think that if she's just being a Black Widow in that sense, she wouldn't want to have any children because they could potentially share in her wealth.
Well, here's the thing. Without jumping ahead too far, one of the other Slytherins notes, or actually Blaze himself notes that, hey, he doesn't seem very high on Death Eaters.
Right.
Therefore, that eliminates a lot of Death Eater kids. Nott is a convicted Death Eater. Malfoy is a convicted Death Eater.
Mm-hmm.
Crabbe and Goyle have been rumored and floated about.
I mean, let's be fair. Crabbe and Goyle would have never been invited regardless.
That's fine. But regardless...
They're Death Eater parents.
They're connected with Voldy and they're connected with Death Eaters.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't leave very many Slytherins. This is a former head of house of Slytherin. He probably wants to have at least one.
Maybe.
And
I think also partially, I'm sure that this woman has some kind of...
Notoriety.
Thank you. About her that even if it's like an infamous kind of a thing, you still have some kind of fame in your infamy.
You know what?
Like, I want to know that person.
No, I don't think he'd be attracted to that history of 7 husbands all dying mysteriously. I think he might be attracted to the vanity because good-looking woman.
Yeah.
And everything we know about Blaze Zabini is he's a good-looking kid who's clearly popular. Mm-hmm. So popular, good-looking kid is, I think, where Horace is going for.
And
as
she's very wealthy.
He's all about connections. He's all about connections. So he thinks Blaze might become something because of a vain reason of he's good looking and he's popular. He might end up being something. Let's check it out. It might be as simple as that, honestly. So Slughorn gets into Neville's awkward history, and Slughorn ends up being a little on the non-committal side with Neville.
He's like, I'm going to keep an eye on you.
He seems very down on Neville to start. But then after Ginny said, Neville and I were at the Ministry of Magic 2 this summer.
Right.
Then he's like, were you now?
Have some more food.
Yeah. And then
Tell me about it.
His image of Neville is raised after that. So it comes out to a neutral, meh. I don't know.
I'm not going to dismiss you just yet.
Yeah, I'm not going to make a decision on you yet.
Yeah.
Unlike Belby, who's out. So...
Which just take a second. I feel so bad for Belby because it's like, okay, I don't care if your parents don't necessarily talk or not. The fact that he judges you based on you not having that connection to your uncle, I know he's all about connections and stuff, but if you're like, I'm looking for kids who are going to go far in life and who could benefit me later on down the road, why dismiss this child just because his dad doesn't talk to him? Who's to say he's not going to have a relationship with his uncle in the future?
Arguably the most remarkable thing about this kid is his uncle's accomplishment.
Right.
So if he doesn't have any connection to his uncle's accomplishment, he then
I
is lowered in value.
It's also just why even talk to him in the first place? It's not his accomplishment.
He didn't know
it's
that.
his uncle's. I don't know.
Well, you're hoping when you find out Marcus Belby and you find out his uncle, not find out because Slughorn knew Damocles. He knew his uncle because he had his uncle.
Right.
So he knew, he's a fantastic wizard. And then he finds out, your nephew is a Ravenclaw? Oh, I bet he's really brilliant. I bet he's going to be just as brilliant.
I guess I'm just thinking from my perspective. If I were to pick students to be in my personal club as a teacher, maybe I would pay attention to ones where I knew their siblings. I might talk to them a little bit more, but I think I would wait to see what they're like as a student first, and then see if they have potential. And
You're telling
go
me
from there.
You were telling me.
I wouldn't just be like, "Oh, you're related to some famous person." Hey.
No. Not just some famous person. Let's say you have had a student, and you love this student. You're like, "Wow, this student is brilliant. This student is on point. This student is great." And you find out somewhere down the road, a relative of said student is coming up your class list. you wouldn't have a preconceived notion of like, oh,
I
this
think
kid
that
this kid might be good. This kid comes from a good family. He might be smart. She might be
I
great.
think I talk to them and be like, oh, hey, how's your brother or sister or cousin doing? Because I taught them, I liked them
You wouldn't
a
have
lot.
any preconceived notions on that incoming student based on history
I might
with the
pay
family.
attention to them a little bit more, but I wouldn't
Uh-huh.
necessarily be like,
Yeah, you would.
hey, you're going to be amazing because you're related to X,
No,
Y,
you would
and
want to
Z.
find out though. You'd be interested. You'd be like, oh, I hope this kid is as smart as his older brother or his whatever or his cousin.
I guess. I just still think he's
Uh-huh.
a flawed system.
Dumbledore even mentions he has a knack for it.
And he does have a knack for
This
it.
is seems to
I
be a
guess I
good
just
system.
don't like it because I like treating all my students as like, you all have the potential to do good.
Generally, yes, but I think that's where Slughorn is, and we'll get to see Slughorn in a teaching role later in this book, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the idea, the image that we've gotten of Slughorn so far, is that he is generally open to whoever showing talent. He doesn't necessarily pre-decide like you're great, you're bad. He gives you a chance.
Right.
If you screw up that chance, that's on you.
I mean, that's how Ginny got in.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
She proved herself. Granted, it was by hexing Zachariah Smith.
Which I just love.
But he saw that. He had no idea about her. Granted, I'm sure he knows the Weasley name, but he didn't know anything about Ginny.
Mm-hmm.
Sees her doing something he deems as, wow, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
And is like,
Come to lunch with me.
he didn't care about the Weasley name. He didn't care about her being young. He didn't care about her being a girl or a Gryffindor or whatever. He's just like, that was pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Come on over.
Yeah.
So I honestly think he's actually pretty fair on how he does this. It's just you better live up to your ability, otherwise he doesn't care as much.
Well, I guess with the Belby thing, I just think like
It's a true meritocracy.
you haven't given Belby a chance to prove himself yet, and the fact that he doesn't have the connection to his uncle, and then immediately severing him because he doesn't have that connection to his uncle is like, oh, what if he's amazing at charms or something? Like, give him a chance. Team Belby.
Wow, okay. I think that's your Ravenclaw bias coming out.
Maybe.
It's a true meritocracy with Slughorn.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is, which is not the worst way to go about it. Anyway, obviously we mentioned Ginny hexed Zachariah Smith. That's got her in
and
the compartment.
Harry is there for being Harry.
And Harry's the grand prize. Saves Harry for last, which Blaze scoffs at a little bit.
I do love that Harry fully recognizes what's going on, which makes sense because one, Dumbledore kind of warned him about it, but also two, this has been going on his entire life. He knows there are those who are just interested in him because of his fame. So,
although he does have the background history where Slughorn did mention, like, I really enjoyed having your mother as a student.
Right.
She was one of my favorites.
Right.
Which that adds a personal touch.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to what you said about Belby, Slughorn, part of his allure to Harry is like, your mother was brilliant. Like, I really enjoyed.
We don't hear much about Lily often in the series. It's more James.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the first time someone's really stepping up and being like, no, your mother was a really talented witch.
Mm-hmm.
So he does have that little personal connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure Slughorn in the back of his head is like, yes, you're the chosen one, but you are a Potter.
Right.
Like, you probably do have some of their talent.
Yeah.
So there's that. Anyway, we get all of the Slug Club, which goes on just like that conversation did, a very long time. And we get the post-Slug Club.
This is where I cringe so much.
So Slughorn realizes it's getting very late, so he sends them all to get ready for the opening ceremonies, if you will, of the school year, the feast. Harry decides on his way back to his compartment that, I could probably follow Blaze into Draco's compartment.
It would be really smart if I put myself into a situation where I was surrounded by people who are known enemies and who have the potential to curse me while I'm under my invisibility cloak, and I have very little chance of finding out anything interesting because we only have like 20 minutes before we arrive to the station. Let's go do that without telling anyone where I'm going. Smart decision.
Well, he doesn't have any time to tell people because they're at the compartment, essentially, when he makes this decision.
I hate this.
He's following Zabini, so Blaze can't actually, like, see him, like, throw on the cloak. And Harry's thought process is that Draco is a little bit more willing to divulge more private information when he's around trusted Slytherins, which is his compartment.
Which does make sense. I'll give him that.
Yeah, haven't we heard something like that before? Haven't we heard? Oh, right. Chamber of Secrets. The whole plot was to use Polyjuice Potion to get into the Slytherin common room.
And he'll spill his guts.
And he'll just talk about all the things.
It reminds me of that like movie cliche of when you're going to turn on the radio or turn on the TV, the minute the news that you're looking for is being broadcast. It's like we're going to come into this compartment and like Malfoy is going to immediately talk about how he's, a new Death Eater, and Harry's going to be like, haha, I knew it, and then go run off to tell Hermione and Ron like, see, I told you so.
So this is off to a rough start because Blaze slips into the compartment and Harry can't get in there fast enough. So he puts his foot out and Blaze is slamming the door against his foot.
Just picture that. Like, he's doing it multiple times. And then he, like, gets pushed to the side when Harry pushes it open.
It's weird enough. I mean, okay. Plausibly, the door could get stuck. Mm-hmm. And it could have issues shutting. Mm-hmm. That's plausible. You start having concerns when the door is slammed backward out of nowhere.
Right.
That's the first question.
Right.
Then Harry decides, I'll take this opportunity of confusion between, I think it's Crabbe and Zabini, get into this like little tussle because Zabini falls in his lap.
Yeah.
And then he takes this moment of opportunity and leaps onto where Blaze would normally sit, mm-hmm. and then hops up into the luggage rack. You're wearing a cloak. There's no chance for somebody to see underneath said cloak.
I mean, it's just like I get you're in the moment. But, sir, you could easily be seen. You could easily knock some of the luggage off of the top. You could be making noises.
How small is this kid that he could fit on a luggage rack?
He's what?
That has luggage
now?
on it.
Yeah, I mean, God, just think of the 16-year-olds that are at your school, right? Like, no, that's not how this works.
I was 6'3" when I was 16. I'm not fitting on no luggage rack.
I would love to see you attempt this, though.
I'm not fitting on a luggage rack on a train.
They'd be like, why is that pair of legs hanging out from above with our compartments? What an idiot.
They end up settling into the compartment, and Draco says a couple of things. Not exactly what Harry was hoping to hear, but he says a couple of things. He says, Lucius was very complimentary of Slughorn back in the day. So he was wondering about Slughorn and the Slug Club and trying to get all that information.
And where was my invitation? Did it get lost?
Yeah, which is where Blaze gets into, he's not a big fan. He doesn't seem to be a big fan of Death Eaters. Mm-hmm. But then Draco's like, yeah, you know what? I'm not really concerned about what some teacher thinks of me. I think I'm going to be leaving Hogwarts soon anyway.
Right.
And
which seems to take all the other Slytherins off guard.
Sure. He goes on to, say, honestly, it's a very valid point that he makes that, Voldy's not really caring about how many OWLs you have. He's more concerned with devotion and service and how you can keep the movement going forward.
Yeah, prove your loyalty to him.
Yeah, prove your worth. Mm-hmm. And worth doesn't always come in OWLs. So
you mean your herbology owl doesn't transform to 16 hours of service?
16 hours? I don't know. Yeah. But anyway, so after this little conversation, where essentially he hints at having a bigger purpose in the Voldy movement, but doesn't actually say anything. Mm-hmm. And to Draco's point, he loves that he has set up the vibe that he's gotten these odd looks around the room, even from Blaze, of mm-hmm. being like, oh, maybe he is more elevated than we think.
Right.
And Draco, and he doesn't say anything further than that because I think he likes he knows how to play a room.
Right.
He's set up the whole room to be like, ooh, you are great. And he doesn't have to say anything more.
Ask me more. Oh, I can't.
The fact that he doesn't say anything just leaves them on this, air of expectation
Mm-hmm.
and awe, and he's like, and scene. And we're good.
Yeah, no, he does an excellent job.
He does an excellent job at playing the room. He's got Blaze, Pansy Parkinson, Crab Goyle, all eating out of his hand, and he's irritated Harry. Like, he has literally achieved every goal he would have had, but he doesn't even know he's irritating Harry just yet. Harry ends up making a noise, and Draco looks up at the luggage rack questioningly and is like, huh. Okay. And then
That sounded like Potter.
and then he say what you will about Draco. He's not an idiot.
No, he's not.
He might be childish at times. He might be a little hard to like at some points, but he's not dumb. So he lets everybody else go ahead. He closes the blinds of the compartment, and then he goes like he's fiddling around in his trunk for something. And Harry's like, "Ooh, he's finally gonna like show something, maybe the object that he wanted Borgin to fix." And then while he's even thinking that, he gets blasted with a petrifying spell.
Which, from Draco's perspective, this would have been such a sweet moment. Like, he's been waiting for this since the end of last year when he tried to attack Harry and, you know, got yelled at. Like, this, he has been dreaming of this.
He didn't just petrify him, Elizabeth. He petrified him, which then he fell from the luggage rack, looking like some deformed crab on his back, or a turtle on his back that couldn't move. And it's an absurd position, because he had to get in this weird position to fit on the luggage rack.
Right.
And Draco takes that in for a second, and he's like, huh. And then just stomps on his face, which breaks Harry's nose, covers him in blood. And then Draco's like, you know what would be even better? Which, honestly, this is a really smart move by Draco. Just wrenching the cloak from underneath Harry, throwing it back over him, so now he's invisible, and then just treads on his fingers as he walks out of the room.
You are so stupid. You are a 16-year-old, but now you should know better.
This was not a wise decision for Harry. There was not much to be gained for the risk that he took. That's a problem. It's not like, you know, we talked about 2 risks that he took in Order of the Phoenix, and both of them were breaking into Umbridge's office.
Right.
And one I felt was foolish because there wasn't much to be gained there.
Right.
Which was the first time he broke in.
Right.
The second time, you could see it. You could be like, okay, well, if he is right and Sirius is in danger, this is a worthwhile risk. Fair. This is not a worthwhile risk.
It's not. And I mean, the fact that he didn't tell anybody, I know he was rushed, but he could have easily just been like, I'm going to follow Zambini into the compartment and be like, okay, that's cool, whatever. Like, they know he has this cloak. They can put 2 and 2 together. But you're surrounding yourselves with enemies who have grudges against you because how your actions have created situations for their families.
So
they don't like you in general.
Let's just recap very briefly. He exited the Weasley's shop in Diagon Alley to go chase after Malfoy under the cloak with 2 of his friends. You could very easily see them.
Right.
Because they can't really fit under the cloak anymore. You spent a week thinking about said chase when you saw Malfoy in Borgin Burkes.
Right.
And now you've endangered yourself by trying to sneak into a crowded compartment to overhear a discussion that Malfoy is having.
In the hopes that this discussion would be anything relevant.
Now my 6th-year stalker vibe is solidifying. Harry is starting to be a little obsessive with Malfoy here, beyond what it has been in the previous 5 years. And I gotta say, it's a little annoying to start off.
I get that he wants to prove he's a Death Eater because he thinks this is going to be the thing this year that people don't take seriously, so I have to prove it right away. But it's like, sir, we're in a war here, and these are people who are related to known enemies. What do you think anybody in the Order would say about this action? You're so stupid with this. I'm sorry. This is Harry's dumbest moment. I don't like it.
Is that becoming a thing on this podcast where each individual guest
That's a dumb
has
Harry moment.
the dumbest Harry moment?
I think so.
Maybe.
Oh gosh.
It is what it is. But we will take a pause here and get to our break sound. And then we will be back with the spoiler section. And Elizabeth will give some of her thoughts on Half-Blood Prince as a whole. You just got a good take from her on a part of this book. So we'll see what other thoughts she has in the spoiler section. We will be right back. Before we get to our break sound, I'd like to acknowledge our friend Andy, who helps us produce our intros and our break sounds. If you want to hear more of Andy's work and like Formula One racing, check out the Outlap F1 podcast. It's your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. You can find them wherever you listen to podcasts, and they even have a YouTube page. So check out Andy, Cody, John, James, and Deanna, and join them on the Outlap.
Where is he? Where's my 1-1?
All right, so we are back in the spoiler section of Chapter 7, The Slug Club. And I want to kick off this spoiler section with, yes, Harry's right. Draco is indeed joined the ranks of the Death Eaters, which I am aware of. And once again, I will state for the record, I know Draco is up to something. But I still get annoyed with how much Harry just pours in his time and efforts into tracking Draco everywhere.
Honestly, it kind of surprises me that Ron and Hermione scoff so much at the idea of it. Because it's like, we know his father is a Death Eater. We know he's in that social circle. We know that he has a grudge against Harry. Like, why wouldn't it make sense for Draco to become a Death Eater and be up to something? Like, this seems right up their alley for their usual year of let's learn some things. Let's pay attention to what Draco's doing.
I think it's twofold. Like I mentioned in the non-spoiler, I think they know who Draco Malfoy is, and they know he's hyperbolic to an extreme degree about his own self-importance specifically. And they know Harry has a particular grudge with Draco. They know that they are just the antithesis of each other.
The only thing I could think would be like last year, his obsession led to the downfall of Sirius. So let's be more cautious of Harry's obsessions this year.
I think they're all aware that Draco, once he leaves Hogwarts, would be indoctrinated into that. I don't think there's any illusions that Draco doesn't want to be or wouldn't join. I don't think anybody's saying that he's not. It's just that what purpose would Voldy have for Draco at this particular point in time?
Come after Harry.
Even the Slytherins that were in the compartment were like, why?
Right.
Why would Voldy even want you right now?
Right.
You got a couple of OWLs. You haven't even learned to apparate yet. Like, even the Slytherins in his own compartment are like, come on.
Right.
Come on, man. So if the own Slytherins, who two of their fathers are Death Eaters themselves, are like, come on, man. Like, he doesn't want you just yet. What are Ron and Hermione going to think?
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, broaden your mind. There's so many things he could require of Draco to do.
But the guys that are clued in, Crabbe and Goyle, are like, no. You know what I mean?
I mean, Crabbe and Goyle I wouldn't trust with my deepest, darkest secrets.
Okay. Crabbe and Goyle dumb jokes aside, they're the sons of Death Eaters, who are presumably smarter and more connected.
I guess it shows that, like, Crabbe and Goyle adults are not in that inner circle, because we saw how, like, Bellatrix was aware of the plan, and she was like, oh, Snape's aware of the plan, so, like, clearly they are not part of the plan, which maybe Voldemort forbid him from telling anybody about the plan.
Well, Voldy is a very compartmentalized. Him and Dumbledore are actually quite
Similar in that sense.
quite similar in that they like to keep things segmented.
Yeah.
Because to them, less can go wrong that way.
Right.
So, I mean, whatever. You can have whatever opinion of that you want. But my point is that if Crabbe and Goyle, who are very literally interconnected in this whole thing, are skeptical about, like, why would he want you? What could he possibly use you for? And they're in it. Ron and Hermione are just being like, oh, it's Draco being Draco. Like, whatever. Even the Slytherins are like, this is Draco being Draco. Like, I mean, literally everybody is like, meh.
The only thing, though, there's like the way Draco phrases it, it just screams to me how kids do of, like, I want you to ask me about this. Let me hint that this is happening, but I'm not going to tell you the whole story until you ask me about it. But it's like, it's so implied that, like, yes, this has already happened. This is a fact, not a Draco wishing to become a Death Eater. Like, he is a Death Eater right now. I don't know. It just frustrates me that they're like, oh, Harry becomes so obsessed, but it's like, well, he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. But as Julie often points out, the prolonged camping trips in book 7 bother her. This bothers me.
This doesn't bother me.
And we'll get into it later. I've already talked more than I need to on stalking Draco Malfoy. Yeah. 6th-year stalker. Go ahead with your thoughts on Half-Blood Prince.
It's interesting because, like, as anyone who has listened to the podcast knows, like, Order of the Phoenix was my favorite, as is yours. So this book, like, when it came out, I remember initially being a little disappointed because it wasn't as thick as Order of the Phoenix.
Or Goblet of Fire.
Or Goblet of Fire. Like, I was like, oh, they're getting bigger and bigger. This is fantastic. I can't wait till the 7th one comes out. It's going to be like the dictionary. Like, I can't wait. That just shows you how nerdy I am because I just wanted to read so much. So I was like, oh, it's lesser. The story, like, I liked the story. Don't get me wrong. I always enjoy reading it, but it never sticks out in my memory as much. So I think every time I read it again, it's like, I'm discovering more than I got the first time through. I think part of why I didn't, like, immediately find it my favorite is probably because the romance, honestly. Like, all the stupid little love triangles, I have never been a big fan of that, like, that cliche in books. So the whole, like, oh, he's with Lavender, but she has feelings for him, and like, I hate that. So for me, that part sucks. But I think Molly said it, the diving into Voldemort's past is fascinating to me, and I want more scenes of that. I love the Dumbledore and Harry time, and I really, really, really like the end, as horrible and sad and depressing as it is. Like, it just gets me. It wrecks me so much more than, like, Cedric's death did, or even, like, Sirius's death did. Like, seeing Dumbledore's death and knowing what that implies for book 7. It's like, oh my gosh. I remember finishing the book and just being like, well, now what? Now what's going to happen next? Like, how can we possibly go further without Dumbledore? So I really like it. I also, just because this is me, I really like seeing the Inferi, the zombies in the end, because that just speaks to me. But yeah.
So you really liked my transition from Jam to Inferi.
I laughed so hard, you guys. Oh my gosh. I'm pretty sure my neighbors were like, what is she laughing about?
That was in the episode with Jen and Molly.
For the record, my favorite jam would probably be strawberry.
I think you have some, as the teacher that you are.
Oh, right. Slughorn.
There you go.
Yes.
Getting us back on track.
Sorry. It's interesting seeing Slughorn teach potions. And I think the way it's interesting seeing, I mean, we've seen different teachers approach, like, you know, defense against the dark arts, but otherwise, for the most part, the professor has been the same throughout. So it's interesting seeing a different professor tackle the same subject. Snape's teaching seems very much like, I'm putting the instructions on the board, you idiots figure it out, go. And when you mess up, it's because you're stupid. And Slughorn approaches it with, like, I feel like more creative approaches. Like, the very first lesson like you say, like there's always the impressive first lesson of having the multiple cauldrons.
Every teacher does
Every
it.
teacher does it. But like you have the multiple cauldrons with examples of what the potion should look like and being like, okay, this is what the finished product is like. You try to match it and go. Like I think that's a really sophisticated way of approaching the lesson. Or like later when he's like, like create something for me today. Let do something fun. What would you like to create? Like I think that's really really cool, and I think it brings the joy of the subject that Snape never really seemed to bring about, and I think it brings about some creativity, and it gives them more experience with like what's out there as options of potions. I think that is really really cool. And of course I love Harry getting the actual book, the potions book, and everything that comes with that. Because it's interesting seeing Harry almost form a relationship with Snape without realizing that he's doing it.
Well, and you also get glimpses of Snape as a student.
Yeah, and his genius with being a potions master.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I look forward to the book. It's just the romance aspect. I could do without the love triangles.
It is kind of interesting that we get so early on in book 5, the Order of the Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a minute for us to get to Half-Blood Prince.
Yeah.
It takes a minute. But
Yeah.
I agree with you that the back end of this book is really special. I think the back end of this book is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And if I feel like I want to read Harry Potter really quick, I go to a couple of chapters at the back end of this book and I just reread them because I am that much entertained by them. So there is some really special bits to this book, as much as I dislike Harry stalking Draco for what seems to be half the book. So there is that.
Harry gets Creature and Dobby to stalk him. It's like
He does recruit stalkers.
delegated stalkers.
Do you have anything else?
No, I'm excited for the next chapter.
I have one last thing to get to before we wrap up this episode, and that is a comment. We have a comment that we had to say for the spoiler section.
Oh, right.
So we have AV, who has left us a couple of recent comments here. They are commenting on chapter 4 of Half-Blood Prince, which is, ironically, Horace Slughorn's chapter. And the question was the resurrection stone broken or just the ring? What I mean is that the Horcrux was the ring, not the stone. What do you think? And to answer that question the best that I can is it's technically unclear. And here's why. Is because every reference you get to the Horcrux refers to the ring. It's
Right.
the ring, the ring, the ring, the ring, the ring.
Right.
So that, to your question, it's a very valid question. Is it the ring or is it the stone? And why is it even the stone? Well, because the description that we get of the destroyed Horcrux, quote unquote, is a crack down the center of the stone.
Right.
We
like
don't
the Elder Wand.
right down the elder wand
Yeah.
of the stone. We don't necessarily get the description that the band of the ring is broken. We get the description that the stone has been broken. So that's where the confusion kind of comes in: is it the stone or is it the ring? And can those two versions of powerful magic coexist in the stone, or does it have to be the ring? It's a great question. And as far as I can tell, I don't think there's a clear answer one way or the other.
I guess like we saw the diary got destroyed with all the ink coming out of it. We see the locket shatters. So if you're going to destroy a ring, having the stone crack makes the most sense in terms of like dramatic effect. But he's right, because it is a gift from death. You would think that that would be the most powerful magical object. A Gryffindor's sword wouldn't be able to affect it.
The terminology is a little weird versus the visual that they try to put in your mind. Everything you find on the Horcrux will say the ring. But the visual they give you is the stone is cracked.
Right.
Are those two things one? The stone and the ring one, and it's considered one? Or are they separate entities? That's a conversation you can have. But it's a very valid question that AV asks, and I don't think there's unfortunately a super clear answer to it.
No. But thank you for the question.
But thank you for the question. Thank you for clearly listening to us debate these things. We really do appreciate it. And if anyone else has a question that they'd like us to discuss or expand on, please comment on our Spotify. You can comment on our Twitter and on our Instagram, which you can find at HogwartsAPod. Elizabeth is really good at posting on Twitter. Jen is really good about posting on Instagram. So I appreciate both of you for that.
I try.
And also you can participate in our polls, which are on Spotify, which are fascinating to see the results come into those. All of which helps us have a better discussion on the podcast for all of you. So we appreciate all of that. If you want to support the podcast, do all of those things I just mentioned. But also you can leave a voice message by clicking that link wherever you're listening to the podcast. You can also donate to the podcast by clicking the Support This Podcast link, which is wherever you can hear this podcast. It's right there. And all of those financial donations really help us through all of this effort and work that we have to put into this. It's a lot. So we thank you for any support that way as well. And as always, thank you for listening. Share this podcast if you like it so that we can continue to grow. And
come back next week.
And come back next week when we will cover Chapter 8. So thanks for listening, everybody. Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at HogwartsAPod.